The new intake of Tory MPs arriving for a reception at number 10 this evening. Many of them had been furious at the way the Prime Minister tried to rewrite standards rules to stop a veteran Tory MP being suspended. Just before they arrived, number 10 announced it was now demanding tougher restrictions on MPs' second jobs.
I don't have a second job, so it doesn't affect me, so I'm committed to my one job, my main job.
Well, I think the Prime Minister's doing exactly the right thing. We need to stop legislators being lobbyists, and that's what he's proposed today. I'm thrilled.
Any thoughts on the Prime Minister's proposals for second jobs?
I'm just a window cleaner, mate.
The Prime Minister's move 2 weeks ago won him some of the worst newspaper headlines he's endured in office and prompted Labour to push for a Commons vote tomorrow, restricting MPs' outside work. Keir Starmer was announcing that move as news broke of the Prime Minister's sudden conversion to tightening up the rules on MPs' outside interests.
It's time now to act. Thank you very much, and I think we'll now take questions.
As he sat down, his deputy, Angela Rayner, told him Boris Johnson was now backing the same approach as Labour.
But apparently the Prime Minister's just written to the Speaker saying that MPs should be banned from acting as strategist advisors, and so you're already cleaning things up a little bit, but there's still way too much to do.
So we want the vote tomorrow already?
Well, allegedly.
The Prime Minister's decided to back some recommendations from the Committee on Standards in Public Life, which have been sitting on the shelf for more than 3 years. He wrote to the Speaker saying it's a matter of regret that the House has not yet taken forward these specific recommendations. The government would like to see them adopted as a matter of urgency.
Well, the recommendations were originally made by the Committee on Standards in Public Life in 2018. As far as I'm aware, the government has been in power since that point, so it could have done this at any previous opportunity. The good news for the Prime Minister is that if he wants this done with urgency, all he has to do is to provide time for the House of Commons to debate these matters.
Theresa May.
Earlier in the Commons, the Prime Minister's predecessor attacked his decision to try to change the rules in order to spring former Minister Owen Paterson from his punishment for improper lobbying.
The attempt by right honourable and honourable members of this House, aided and abetted by the government, under cover of reform of the process, effectively to clear his name, was misplaced, ill-judged and just plain wrong.
Sorry, can we hurry up, please?
Earlier, cameras were invited into number 10 for the Prime Minister's meeting with his Greek counterpart. Many of the new Tory MPs Boris Johnson is currently chatting to inside will be pleased to hear rules are being tightened up. Many long-serving MPs were tonight grumbling that the rules were being changed in a hurry to bail Boris Johnson out of difficulties of his own making. Well, it's a bit of a generalisation to say that it was the new intake 2019 Tory MPs who were very unhappy a fortnight ago when the government was railroading through these changes and trying to get Owen Paterson off the hook, and that it is the older generation of Tory MPs who are very unhappy tonight. A generalisation, but one that holds a bit of water. A lot of Tory MPs who've been around Parliament a long time tonight saying they're not sure that this is the way to cook up rules. The Prime Minister's doing it too quickly. I saw one Tory peer scuttling down from the Lords to the Commons to give advice, he said, to some of his MP friends who were a bit worried about whether their outside interests were the right side of the line that Boris Johnson now looks like he wants to draw. One other final point, Labour, although the Tories are currently briefly perhaps on the same page as them, says it wants to tighten things up even further if it comes into government, and only jobs like being an army reservist or an NHS doctor would be permitted for MPs, and giving legal advice like Keir Starmer did will be out of the question.
Gary Gibbon. Earlier I was speaking to the MP Chris Bryant, who is the chair of the Common Standards Committee, and I began by asking if he thinks these changes are clear enough.
Look, the most important thing we need to do first is agree that we are always going to enforce the rules that we already have, such as the rule on paid lobbying, which has been in place in some shape or form since 1695, and which Owen Paterson fell foul of, and unfortunately then the Prime Minister decided to move heaven and earth to try and protect him. So it's good that we've dealt with that now. I've long supported, I don't know what my committee will do incidentally, and it will be improper for me to prejudge what my committee will do, but I've long supported the idea of banning MPs from taking jobs where they are basically engaged in paid lobbying by another name. So where you're a parliamentary strategist, consultant or advisor. We can deal with when people break the rules. The question is just how do you make sure that the rules are clear, Because I think what voters want is they want to know that no MP, when they stand up in the House of Commons or when they're wandering around the corridors of power talking to government ministers, is engaged in a conflict of interest between, advocating for their constituents, fighting for their constituency, and arguing for what is good for the whole nation on the one hand, and on the other hand, some kind of private personal interest, whether that's a commercial interest or some other personal interest.
You could argue that the Commons is so big that actually policing all this is a big undertaking. And I mean, you really need an infrastructure and people who are going to police this, maybe even civil servants.
Well, no, I think you need an independent commissioner, which is what we have, the Independent Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, who
that hasn't worked,
has a team, including legal support.
That didn't work.
Well, it did work in the Owen Paterson case. She investigated, she came to her conclusions. The member then appealed to my committee. We heard the evidence. We saw that it was stark and compelling. We produced a report and recommended that he be suspended from the House of Commons. Unfortunately, the government decided to tear up the rules 9/10 of the way through a disciplinary process for a named individual. And that is completely inappropriate. All I'd say to the Prime Minister is just hold your horses, calm down. Christmas is coming, and by the time we get to Christmas, there will be a report from my committee. We've been doing an investigation into the Code of Conduct and the way it operates for the last year. The report will be there soon, and it'll be drawn up by not just me, but by 7 members, lay members, independent members of the public, and 7 members of Parliament. And I think you'll be impressed by the work that we've done, because it's based on evidence that we've been gathering in for a year.
Well, it sounds as if there's an enormous amount of work to do if a wholly satisfactory system is to be developed for the whole of the Palace of Westminster.
What we have now is we have some clear rules. Sometimes these have been broken. I can't talk about specific cases because those cases might come before my committee at some point if the Commissioner launches an investigation and finds that there's been a breach of the rules. But as I say, in the Owen Paterson case, it was so absolutely clear that he had broken the rules. And I honestly feel that the last 3 weeks, the way the Prime Minister moved heaven and earth to try and protect Owen Paterson from being sanctioned has done immeasurable damage to the reputation of Parliament. We just need to get back onto a steady footing. The government should keep its hands off independent parliamentary processes. That's a job for my committee, not for government ministers. And
on that
I would say this must have been utter misery for Owen Paterson the last few weeks as well.
On that point, are you satisfied that Jacob Rees-Mogg is with you on all this?
I'm about to go and see Jacob Rees-Mogg, so we'll find out.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Chris Brand.